Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. Okay, so today I have some romance book recommendations for you where the hero falls first. This is obviously one of my favorite things. I love to see a man just completely Twitter-pated about the woman that he wants, and I absolutely love it when he falls first, and maybe there's some pining or, just absolutely head over heels for his woman. So that's the books that I have to recommend for you today. Some of these are pretty popular, some of them are less so, but I hope you find some books in here that you want to try out that you think you would enjoy, so let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, starting off with a book that is pretty popular, but I feel like fits this trope really, really well, is Torn by Carrie Ann Cole. This is a taboo age gap romance, it's a contemporary romance, and this is one of my favorite books of all time. Even though it has some things in here that I usually don't like, when the book begins, our heroine is fairly young. She's 17. She does end up becoming 18 before anything happens with her, and the love interest, who is a man who is much older than her. He is her father's best friend, and he actually helped raise her. And I know, like, if you're anything like me, that maybe that, like, puts you off so much that you, like, think, I don't want to read that at all. But if you are, open to it, I highly recommend it because it is taboo, but it's absolutely beautiful, and the way that Carrie Ann Cole tells this story of this man who has had such strong feelings for the heroine for so long, it's just absolutely beautiful. I love the way that he loves her and wants to protect her and how he is always very respectful of her, and I just feel like there is something so special about this book, and I love it so much, and this is definitely a case of where the hero fell for the heroine first. It's chef's kiss. It's fantastic. I loved it so much. Okay, so another book that I have on here is also a fan favorite, a very popular book, but I feel like it, again, hits this trope so freaking well, and that is The Takeover by T.L. Swan. This is part of a series, but you don't necessarily need to read them in order. This is book 2 in the series, but this man, Tristan Miles, in this book, he becomes infatuated, enamored with this woman who is a little bit older than him. I wouldn't really call this an age gap. She's not that much older than him, although she is a widow and she does have kids. But they are working together. They're not like business partners, but they are in a work arrangement where he is actually trying to take over her deceased husband's business, buy it from her, and she is trying to hang on to that because she doesn't want her husband's legacy to disappear. And in the process, he finds himself just completely captivated and entranced by this woman, and he will do whatever it takes to have her, and not just to have her for one night, although that is definitely what he aspires to in the beginning. Like, he very quickly realizes that his feelings for her go beyond lust and physical attraction, and once he gets a taste of her, he will do anything to make her and her children his and be a part of their family, and it is so beautiful. It is so beautiful watching this man literally put anything on hold for her and her kids. The way that he does, like, he would literally do anything for this woman to prove to her that he is legit, that he's serious about wanting to be a part of her family and to help raise her kids. It's just beautiful. The way he loves her, I mean, honestly, like, there are very few books that make me cry, but this book is one of them. I loved it. It was fantastic. If you have not, for some reason, not read this book yet, you must, because this man simps for her so hard, and it's a thing of beauty. Okay, the next book that I have is actually a historical romance, and it is Tempting the Bride by Sherry Thomas. So this book actually may be my favorite Sherry Thomas book that I have read. I love the story so much, and in large part because of the way that the hero really fell for the heroine first, and then he kept it a secret and he didn't reveal it. This book has several twists and turns, and it is a little bit surprising, and it is absolutely beautiful. So the hero is Viscount Hastings, and he has really had a thing for Helena Fitzhugh for a very long time, but he sort of does that very classic thing where he hides it behind, like, teasing her and poking fun of her, and so they sort of have this antagonistic relationship, and she doesn't want anything to do with him because he's kind of a jerk to her. Meanwhile, he is in love with her and has been in love with her for a very long time, but of course he won't ever say anything. So something happens where Helena is actually having an affair with a married man, and right on the cusp of her getting discovered enamored and ruined, Viscount Hastings steps in and saves the day, but by doing so, that means that he and she will marry. And she doesn't want that to happen because she doesn't love him, she doesn't even like him, and so anyway, they end up in this marriage of convenience, and Viscount Hastings is determined to help her to realize that he's not such a bad guy, and to also prove that he loves her and that he isn't just a jerk. However, things happen, there's a carriage accident, and she is involved in that, and she loses her memory, and she cannot remember the affair with this other man. She cannot remember falling in love, she believes, with her now husband. And it was so beautiful. It was so complex. It was so complicated. I almost included this book in my complicated relationships video because I feel like there are so many different layers and aspects of this story going into it that make it just so completely enjoyable if you love a complicated relationship where you're like, I don't know how this is going to work out, but I am here for it. And the way this man, like, pines for her, it's just so beautiful. I love this book so much. It has a completely different feel than Ravishing the Heiress did, so if you didn't love Ravishing the Heiress, or even if you did, I would still highly recommend this because this one feels definitely less angsty than Ravishing the Heiress. It's a little bit more lighthearted and just so beautiful and very heartwarming towards the end. It's just fantastic. So if you didn't love Ravishing the Heiress, check this one out for sure. Don't write Sherry Thomas off because this book is much different than that one. But even if you did love Ravishing the Heiress like myself, I still recommend that you read this because it was fantastic. Okay, the next book that I have to recommend is The Lady Thompson Air by Harper St. George. This is actually book 3 in this series, and for me, this series, each book got better than the one before. So book 1, I didn't love, but I saw promise in the other stories that were going to be told. Book 2, I really enjoyed, but I had like a little tiny reservation with it. Book 3, I gave 5 stars. This book is book 3. I love this book so much, and that is largely because of the way that the hero has really sort of inwardly pined for the heroine. So the hero is the son of an American, businessman, not a fortune hunter, but a self-made man, basically, and he swears he's never going to come back to England. However, circumstances arise where he is forced to come to England from America, and he sees something has happened with his father, and his father has sort of given him an ultimatum that he must marry or things are going to happen negatively for his sisters. And because he doesn't want that to happen, he decides that he's going to have to try and find a wife, or at least give the illusion of finding a wife to protect his sisters from his dad's sort of bogus plan for them. And so when he does that, he ends up meeting Lady Helena March. Now, they didn't meet in this book. You see them meet up in previous books, and you can tell right away that they had chemistry. Lady Helena March is a widow, and she is also heavily involved in helping, like, orphans and ruined women. And so because of that, she sort of is on the cusp of scandal because she is, not married, has no chaperone, and she's being involved with these women who are considered ruined. So she needs a husband to give her protection and help her to get financial resources to provide this home for these women and these children. So they work things out, these two do, and they agree to put on this farce that they are going to be married and everything is going to be great. And of course, this hero adores her, and he has so many strong feelings for her, and he continuously keeps fighting them while she kind of keeps him at arm's length. Oh my gosh. And the way that this couple finally comes together in love, and the way that the hero specifically accepts the secret the heroine has been keeping from him, was such a beautiful thing. I adored this book. I loved the way this man loved this woman and wanted to have her. It was so good. It was fantastic. This is one of my favorite historicals that I read. I believe I read this at the end of last year. I had an arc of it, but if I had read it this year, I would have made it on my list of favorites for the year because it's so freaking good. Okay, and the next book that I want to talk about is A Scoundrel of Her Own by Stacey Reid. This is part of a series, but these all read as standalones. You don't need to read this series in order. This is her newest release. It came out in December, and this is probably my favorite in the series. I loved this so much. This has a very classic childhood friends to lovers, and that's also one of my favorite things. I love it so freaking much. So let me tell you what it's about. So we have Devlin in here, who is not a lord. He is not a titled man. He is very much just a commoner. And by some chance, he ends up meeting Ophelia as children. There was a carriage accident, and she was, basically getting swept down a river. This young boy, who I think he's 12, jumps in the river and saves her, and then he ends up whisking her away to this cabin in the woods where they try to survive for a few days until they get rescued. And in that time, that brief time, they form this very adorable connection, and that has permanently stayed with this man into adulthood. And so he has ended up building and shaping his entire life to become a self-made man with a fortune, with power, to be able to win Ophelia's heart from her family and from her. He wants to have her, so he's built what he believes is a very successful life in order to do that. And when they meet again as adults, it's so beautiful. Like, the way that this hero spent his entire life working towards securing the hand of this woman just, like, hit me with a ton of bricks. You know, I feel like we talk a lot about, like, grand gestures in books, and a lot of times that grand gesture feels maybe it fits the story, maybe it feels a little hollow, but even though this wasn't necessarily a huge grand gesture, like, changing the course of his life, everything with his sights set on having Ophelia at some certain point as his wife, just, like, hit me in a way that made me feel like this is a man who completely fell head over heels with this woman and then did everything in his power to be worthy of her. And, like, if that is not the epitome of the perfect romance hero, like, I don't even know what is. Like, seriously, this book was fantastic. I loved their connection. I loved their love story. I felt it was just absolutely beautiful. And this man, simp grade A, fantastically obsessed with the heroine in the best possible way. Okay, then now the next book that I have to recommend is a paranormal romance, and it is Eternal Kiss of Darkness by Janine Frost. I feel like Janine Frost in general does heroes who simp for the heroine, like, extremely well. Like, these men are powerful, strong alphas, but, like, they are weak for their women, and I just cannot get enough of that. So this is part of a series. However, I do feel like you could read this book as a standalone if you wanted to try and get a taste for Janine Frost, if you haven't read her before, if you kind of have a hankering for a broody, angsty vampire romance. Like, seriously, you need to read this book. It is so good. I read this book years and years ago, and then I recently reread it, and it still is one of my favorites by this author. I think it is fantastically well done. It is so romantic, has a really great background plot, and it is also steamy as well. So this book, we have a very ancient vampire, Mencheris. He's extremely powerful, very, very ancient, very cultured, very civilized, very elegant. And he finds himself in a bit of a pickle when this book opens, in that he is actually almost meeting his doom. He's being attacked, and it's not going well. In comes this heroine, human, who hears sounds of a fight from outside, and she rushes in, saves his life, and from that moment on, this man, this vampire, becomes obsessed with her and literally can think of nothing else but making her his woman. And it is fantastic. It's one of my favorite books in the series. Anytime that I want a vampire romance, like, I recommend this book, and I want to pick this up because this man was so gobsmacked by the fact that this human woman came in and saved him that he was just like, yes, her. I am obsessed with her. I must have her forever and all time. It was so great. I loved it so much. All right, now the next book that I have to recommend is actually a fantasy romance, and it is Promise of Darkness by Beck McMasters. This is the first book in her fantasy romance series, and this is all about the Fae. So when this book opens, there is this political alliance between the king of, like, the Dark King and the Dark Queen. They have different rivaling courts. They have this alliance that if she sends one of her daughters to his land for 3 months, then they won't have this war happen. And so the queen sends her daughter Iskvian to go and live with Thiago for 3 months. And this couple has a pretty complex relationship and history that is revealed very gradually through the course of this story. The writing in this book is very beautiful and evocative and very, very, very subtle in the way that it conveys what is happening in this couple's life and what may have happened in the past and what may happen in the future. And I also really loved the side characters in this book and the fantasy elements here. I feel like this is a very underrated gem in the fantasy romance world, and I wish more people would read it and talk about it because it's fantastic. But this dark, powerful, broody man, once again, has fallen for the heroine first, completely head over heels for her, and is so captivated and riveted by her that he will literally risk his kingdom for her. Come on now, this man, I love this couple so much, and I love this book so much, and he is a complete simp for the heroine, so if that is your thing, I highly recommend this book. Beck McMasters is a fantastic writer, and I adore this book, honestly, so freaking much. Don't go into it, if you're a fan of A Court of Mist and Fury, like, don't go into it and compare it with that, because it's not the same at all, but I hear it often compared to that, and I feel like this is its own individual thing, which I dearly, dearly love. But if you're going to go into that thinking you're going to get another Resand, another A Court of Mist and Fury, you're probably going to be disappointed. But if you go into this expecting a unique fae, dark and light, opposing courts romance that is a little bit slow build and beautiful, like, I think you would really love this. So pick this one up. Okay, now I actually think I saved the best for last for you all. And that is Indigo by Beverly Jenkins. Now, I cannot think of a more perfect historical romance than this book, or a more perfect historical romance hero than Galen. Like, he literally is one of the most romantic heroes that I have ever read in my life. This book is deeply romantic, and if you love a hero who is always trying to prove, not necessarily prove, but show the heroine that he is invested, that he is serious, and that he adores her, oh, you have to pick this book up. It's so freaking beautiful. This book is basically about our heroine she was a former slave and she is now free, but because she worked in the indigo fields as a child when she was enslaved, her palms are stained indigo. And she is now free, so she is helping the Underground Railroad at that time protect slaves who are trying to get free and get to safety. So when that happens, she ends up taking care of a man, Galen, who is also known as the Black Daniel. He is a major player in freeing slaves at that time and getting them to safety. He's injured and he ends up in Hester's care. There's some beautiful caretaking in here where she nurses him back to health, and that is the catalyst for him falling completely in love with her that continues throughout the rest of the book. I love this book so much. The way this man loves her and how he loves her for who she is, and everything that has happened to her in her past and the future that he wants them to have together is just so completely beautiful and romantic, and I adore this book and this hero so much, and if you haven't read this yet, you need to. So, alright, there you have it. Those are my recommendations for some of my favorite romances where the hero falls first. I hope you enjoyed this video, my friends. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see y'all in my next video.